spite of our long association. He was born in New Albany, Indiana, and grew up in St. Charles, Missouri. Now, there must be a story about how he got from Missouri to Michigan, but we'll leave that for another time. He holds degrees from the University of Missouri, Purdue, and Ohio State. And his career includes employment in the National Audubon Society, the Michigan State University, that's where I first met you, George, and the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. He retired in August of 1999 after 29 years as manager of the Michigan Chamber of Commerce's Natural Resources Programs. So now he volunteers at the Michigan Historical Museum, where each Friday he works with young people interpreting our rich cultural heritage there. He often speaks to mid-Michigan churches and social organizations about the Great Lakes state, where to go and what to see, as he's already been telling you. He has a quarterly radio program about Michigan historic personalities and businesses, which airs over local radio stations WFMK FM and WJIM AM. He's rewriting each of the scripts and expanding the bibliographies. And tonight you realize that he has carefully prepared a bibliography to accompany the exhibit of children's books set in Michigan. In 1976, back in the days of the bicentennial, he authored People of Michigan, 40 Nationalities Which Settled in Our State. And it is a book published by the Michigan State Department of Education, and one that I treasure in my personal library. So this evening, George will tell us about Michigan holiday traditions. Some of them you may already have in your families, and then maybe you will hear about some that are new. So,
thank you.
Thank you, George, for being with us.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to be here in beautiful Turner Dodge House and to talk about holiday traditions. Holiday traditions, not only as we think of traditions, but as you think about traditions, I think another part of it is also surprises. So this evening, let's go back and forth. I bet every one of you think back to when you were a very small child. I bet one of your first memories is of a surprise or a tradition relating to the holiday season. Just very quickly, growing up in St. Charles, Missouri, the year 1935, we were just coming out of the Depression. I was about to go up front. And of course, the teacher was up there to help you. She probably, if this was around in the late 1800s, turn of the century, she was probably about 16 or 17 years old. She had 2 years of high school and maybe 1 year at the Jackson Normal School or one of these other normal schools, and she was your school teacher, and she would help you if you had problems. So that I thought was one of the other interesting types of things, was saying your pieces. And I do have this. This one was written by Henry Pattengill from town here, the educator. And I just think it was just a real interesting thing that a small boy should say. Over 40 different nationalities, of course, as Geneva had mentioned, settled our state, and different customs and from the different ethnic groups. The Polish settlers always put grandfather at the head of the table, and there was always an empty chair. This was for some member of the family that moved away or perhaps had passed away during that year. The Swedish immigrants in the Upper Peninsula had many different types of celebrations. They had what was called candy fishes. They looked very much like gummy bears. They were little jellies that was flavored with peppermint, spearmint, different flavors like this. I think one of the interesting traditions was in Plymouth, Michigan. The banker, typical banker's name, Ebenezer Pennyman.
Oh, wow.
Ebenezer Pennyman would each Christmas morning would sit at the back of his bank, and when the children would come in, they would come up and shake his hand. He would wish them a Merry Christmas and give each of them a quarter. Now, Ebenezer Pennyman was a very leading citizen, and don't get me wrong, in Plymouth, Michigan. But that was, talk to people in Plymouth, that was certainly a custom. Several other up in northern Michigan, a wonderful custom of the new Mission Church up there in Leelanau County was the Native American children and the Scandinavian children would get together and would sing Christmas carols in their church each Christmas Eve. And the Native American children in Cross Village, which was up by Petoskey, over maybe some of you have been through there, they had a tradition that I'd never heard of before. It was called Bozho, which is, I think, taken from the bonjour, which is the French, and they would carry a sack around on New Year's Day, and they would go from home to home, and they would wish everyone, you know, a Happy New Year, and they were supposed to put candy in their sack on New Year's Day. We're going to talk quite a bit about New Year's as the other holiday, Christmas and New Year's. New Year's was very important, and we're going to be seeing a lot more of that throughout this discussion. The miners in the Upper Peninsula, the iron miners, had a very, I think, a very fine tradition. Each New Year's Eve, they would take a decorated tree with them down into the mines, and they would stand around and sing songs, their Christmas carols. There's a very good book. It's called Igna of the Porcupine Mine. It was written by Carolyn Stone, and it describes a little girl going down into the mine with her father. Now, women were not allowed in the mines, but Captain Joe said you could go down because you really weren't grown up yet. But she could watch as her dad and the other miners sang their Christmas carol. And I just think that was just an excellent story. Another book, I may be stressing books tonight because I think several things. Quite often, we don't realize in these children's and juvenile books, the excellent description. There's a book out there that's called Wood River. It's about the sawmills in Bay City. And one day I was over at East Lansing Library, and the librarian comes up to me and she says, "So, what are you doing with that book?" I said, "Well, Kathy, this is the best description of sawmills. If I want to really know what a sawmill smells like, read this book." And you do. I have a lot of respect for these writers of these books. And certainly that was a good one. Another one on West Michigan, We Live in the North, story of a little girl whose family grew Christmas trees. And each year they would send their Christmas trees down to Chicago. And you think this is not an exciting book, but they got into everything from being chased by bears to rustlers of Christmas trees. So I think that was just a very interesting book. I might talk a little about, from time to time, be using these maps. This part of the state, the northeast part, supplied a lot of the evergreens and trees for southeast Michigan. People up in these counties of Presqu'île, Sheboygan, Emmett, they regularly would cut the trees, as we see today on trucks, and bring them down to these urban areas in Michigan, but also they would send them to Boston, New York, and even down into the southern part of the country. Not only the trees, but in the 20s and the 30s, greens became very popular. These were either made into wreaths or a different kind of Christmas decorations up here, or they were loaded on trucks and brought down, and the florists made them down here. Certainly a supplemental income to the men and women who were attempting to farm all this cutover land up here. As we know, this land, much of it was very sandy, poor land, but they could continue to have supplemental income with their Christmas trees. These were called greens, and there's a lot of stories of people like coming down here to the General Motors building and other buildings in southeast Michigan. You always depended on these kind of trees. We went out on the other table is a wonderful children's story about the Christmas tree ship. The Manistee had to Schudeman family. Two brothers and their families each year would cut the Christmas trees up here, put them on their sailing boat. This is before the turn of the century. And take them down here to Chicago and would sell them off of the boat to the people of Chicago, and became an annual tradition for the Chicago people to buy the Schudeman's trees. Well, in 1912, the boat went down and they sank and lost every member of the crew, including the Schudemans. And this was quite a tragedy, not only in Chicago, but in Manistee. But here's one of the real great stories about this is that Mrs. Schudeman and her three daughters kept the tradition alive. The next year, they went to Beaver Island, bought a sailing boat, and sailed it down to Chicago. And for many years afterwards, they kept the Christmas trees going down to Chicago. So that is in a very good, and these books are, this one would, I would say, would be for about a 5, 6, 7-year-old. You know, I'd like you to take a look at these when you, before you leave. Talking a bit about the different kinds of Christmas trees, when the German immigrants first came over here, 1850 or so, they brought the Christmas tree with them. Not cut over there, they could only get in the steerage of the boat just small trees, so they made little feather trees out of goose feathers and brought those over on the boat with them. Of course, wax candles, very dangerous, but used. The other, I don't know if anybody's been up to the St. John's Historical Society. That's across the street from where the courthouse used to stand. The courthouse was demolished recently, but it's a brick building, and they have a museum. The first time I'd ever seen this, the candles on the tree in the regular candle holders, but they had a string and a little weight, like you use for a fishing weight, kept the candles up straight. Yeah, I hadn't seen that one before. Michigan had so many interesting historical things relating to history. Some of the first cards, Christmas cards, were sold by the Kresge Company. Now, Kresge was a Michigan company down in Detroit, and they started selling the Christmas cards. Might have noticed the map up here, and thought I might talk a little about some of the fun things we can do at holidays. All the green and the red dots that you see up here represents a name of a town or village in Michigan that has something to do with either Christmas, New Year's, or the holidays. Let's just start with just a few of them. Of course, the one green one up here near Munisee, the name that certainly denotes the holiday season, Christmas. Christmas, Michigan, started by a man not so long ago, we think it's a lot longer than what it is, 1939, a conservation officer for the Michigan Department of Conservation thought it would be a good idea to build a store and manufacture Christmas toys. So they had the town Christmas, and he started manufacturing toys up there. It wasn't very successful, but the town is still there, and as you drive between Munising and Marquette along Route 28, you can still find Christmas, Michigan, famous for sending postmarks all over the world. People want their stamps marked Christmas. Some of the other towns, yes, there is a St. Nicholas, Michigan. It's north of Escanaba in Delta County. It's a Belgian community. The Belgian people and farmers settled St. Nicholas. Southeast Michigan down here, the green one, Holly. I think many of us know about Holly, Michigan. How about up in Holton County? Cold up here. Frost, Michigan. And what I'm using as a reference for these is a book that has about 5,000 past and present Michigan communities, Michigan place names. I'll leave this out if some of you want to scan it, but it has every place name you can think of in there. This is fun just to go through a few more of these. How about over in Mackinac County, there is a Pine, Michigan. Down in Alcona County, down on the Lake Huron side, is a spruce, Michigan. Marquette County, Goose Lake. Down in here on our way down to Coldwater, and you see it on the 69 all the time, Turkeyville. A little bit of our foods here. There's Turkeyville, Goose Lake. How about Hickory Corners? That's over here near Battle Creek. There's a Walnut. There is a Raisin River down here in the southern corner of the state, as well as a Plum Creek. And if you went up for some jewelry, you could go to the Upper Peninsula. There's a topaz and an agate. These were stops along the railroad. The railroad apparently liked the names of jewelry or jewels, so they named a whole bunch of towns along there. And the one, of course, that we all know right close to Lansing here is Diamonddale. Even you can go just one step further than this. How about the night before Christmas? The stockings. Yes, we have a stocking, which is up here near Cadillac, hung by the Christmas with care. And we do have everybody was having dreams of sugar plums. We do have a Dreamland, Michigan. And we mentioned Plum Creek over here, so sugar plums. A little bit on Santa Claus. The man who first drew Santa Claus was from Germany. His name was Thomas Nast, and he came to this country, followed his wife and children came before him about 1840. He was a cartoonist. He drew political cartoons, and if I mention two symbols or logos, you'll all recognize the elephant and the donkey. Mr. Nast is the one who first drew those, and he also drew the first Santa Claus. Now that Santa Claus, he had a beard and so forth, but the one that really looked like Santa Claus was drawn by a Michigan artist. Haddon Sundblom was the first Michigan artist to draw Santa Claus. He put the red coat on him, the red cap and all. And if I give you the logo, you'll recognize it. How about the Santa Claus in Coca-Cola? Yes, Sundblom from Muskegon drew the Coca-Cola Santa Claus. Also, you might be interested in know, he also had so many other logos that were very familiar to us. The Quaker Oats Man, Camay soap, the profile of the woman on Camay soap, Whitman's chocolates, the scroll, the cursive writing of Whitman's, and the Goodyear tire. We're all drawn by this Michigan artist. Let's talk a little about foods, and I think my favorite writer on this subject is Della Lutz from down in Jackson County. She wrote about farm life in Jackson County in early part of this century. And she talked about the foods that they would have, like for Christmas, of course, the roast goose was always the thing that they had, except she said they never threw away the goose grease. In case you had congestion on your chest, you always applied goose grease. But then, if you had leaking soles to your shoes, the same stuff was good to stop leaks in your shoes. The Norwegian folks over in the Muskegon, this area over on this side of the state, along here by Oceana County, lutefisk, which was their codfish, very popular. And the one that I've always been interested in, it's up in the west here in the Verga County, at the town of Kelpie. There's a fish up there that is a freshwater codfish. It's called burbot. And this freshwater codfish spawns in these rivers under the ice at New Year's. And the people go out there and they cut holes in the ice and they catch these fish. And this is fish that also has caviar, fish eggs. So this is a real delicacy for the Finnish people up in this area. The Ukrainian family, of course, they have a elaborate 12-dish dinner in which they have 12 different kinds of foods that are served, cabbage, baked fish, and so forth. We mentioned New Year's Day, and I think that we should remember that for many people, this was the day of visiting, festivities. Going back to the early days of Detroit, 1800s, when Detroit was first founded in 1805, the French people would hold races with little horses on the Detroit River, frozen river, the ice, and they would race their horses on that on New Year's Day. It was the day of open houses. Lots of history about Sault Ste. Marie and how the people would have these elaborate open houses and entertain on the New Year's Day. The impromptu music, someone always had a fiddle and there'd be dancing and playing of musical instruments. Speaking of instruments, toys, Michigan, very famous for a couple of toys. Every little boy, probably in the early 1900s on up to 1940 or 50, wanted a BB gun. The BB gun or air rifle. And of course, Plymouth, Michigan was the city here in Michigan that had was the major producer of the air rifles. So the air rifle or BB gun from Plymouth, Michigan was well known throughout the United States. Bicycles and tricycles was also made in Plymouth and other places here in town. Bay City had a large adult bicycle factory. This was the days when 1906, 7, 8, cars were not in, but the very popular thing to do was to get on your bicycle. Bicycle built for two, remember that. And this is the traditions around this, that every young man wanted the racing bike just as much as we have the racing cars today. And of course over in Macomb County, the Lionel train. That's been a long, famous train manufacturer here in the state. Interesting on Lionel train a little bit what advertising will do or will not do. For 75 years, the Lionel Train Company advertised in magazines and it always showed fathers and sons. 1974, a little girl wrote to the president of the Lionel Train Company and says, "Why don't you show girls playing with trains? My dad and I have 7 trains." The Lionel Train catalog for 1975 was filled with little girls and their dads playing with trains. So just show you what the advertising and the traditions will do. We don't have it yet, but we sure will in the near future have snow. And of course snow means sleds, and Michigan was a great producer of all kinds of sleds and sleighs. Owasso had the carriage and sleigh company of Owasso. Coldwater was a very large producer of children's sleds, and we had the company here in town, the Bement Company and Lansing Company, both made bobsleds. They could be used both for sleigh riding, but many of them were used on the farms. You would haul things around the farms on bobsleds. Skis, certainly we've had a lot of homemade skis in the northern part of the state, sometimes just made out of barrel staves. One unique type of sleigh was made up in this area of Benzie County up here near Elmira. It was the jumper. This was the one that you would sit down on. It just had one runner. You'd sit on it and you could pop it down here like this. Certainly do not want to leave out the traditions that we have here in the Lansing area. And I'd like to mention a few of these. Parties were generally held at the turn of the century and a little later at the Masonic Temple and at the Women's Clubs. And they tell me that from reading some of these early accounts that the livery stables did quite a good business on those evenings. At the turn of the century, the Lansing Yacht Club, these were young men who had their yachts, and they were really like they were racing boats on the Grand River. On New Year's Day, they would get a wagon with a team, and they would load one of their large wooden boats on this wagon, and they would go around and they would serenade and visit all the young ladies in town that they knew. That was their tradition. We also had a number of ponds out on Lake Lansing Road and all. Ice skating was very popular. And I don't know if you've ever seen these, but I saw one the other day where they had the ice skate, and actually we have the clamp-on skates, but one I'd never seen before, they had a little screw that screwed right into the heel of your shoe. I suppose all of us have memories from around town of the Christmas. When I first came to Michigan, I worked for the Michigan State University and also for the State Soil Conservation Committee. But this was a group of farmers from around the state that worked on soil conservation. We were a state organization, so I got to go down to the reception, down to the Capitol. And this was about 1963. George Romney was the governor. And I thought, this is really something. I'm going to go through, I'm going to shake the governor's hand, and I did. And next to the governor stood Lenore, his wife. I wanted to say something to her, so I didn't, but I said, Mrs. Romney, I understand that you have a dish that the governor likes real well. It's oyster soup. She says, yes, thank you. And I moved on. And I get about 4 people down, and all of a sudden I hear this voice, you, that big tall boy, you come back here. And I came back, and she says, here, write your name and address. I'm going to send you my recipe. Oh. And sure enough, right just about Christmas time, she did. Lenore did send through the recipe from her. So I think we all have memories like this. Some of the things that perhaps we're doing it tonight, and I would suggest, would be the home tours. These are always a great way to know about your town and your city. I mentioned the books. All of these books that's on our list of bibliography out here are available in one of the libraries in town here. The East Lansing Library has all of them. Most of them are in the Lansing Library. And I had passed this out earlier. I did kind of want to end with this. This is written by Henry Pattengill from Lansing, and it is a piece. This is a little poem that a small boy would say. Christmas is bounded on the north by happiness, good wishes, Oyster Lake, and the Isthmus of cranberry sauce. On the east, by the peninsula of Turkey and the ocean of goodies. On the south, by mince pies, candies, and cakes. On the west, by pleasant words, from which it is separated by the mountains of cheerfulness. The capitals of Christmas are peace and goodwill on the Christmas Tree River. Dear teachers, friends, and classmates, we are on the border of this happy country. And before entering, we wish you all Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Said by a small boy.
Thank you.